And so we're going to start with slide 1 and then skip to slide
10 or 11. Yeah, 11. Okay. All right, hang on just a minute. We're working on distribution of the show right now. We'll have that done in just a second.
For some reason, I wrote down 10. I think I wanted to segue and say that we were thinking in terms of coming back to get the history of the reel-to-reel machine. Is that okay?
Okay. I can tell you we're going to be extraordinarily short on time. So we're gonna have to probably start with slide 11 and move on from there.
Go.
So stand by. I am working on our program. Our program distribution that takes. Usually I do this before the top of the hour, so I can't do it until we start streaming. So that's what I'm working on right now. Give you another little bit. And tell you what, let's see, we'll try one more thing here.
And the audio is not going to be on, is that correct?
Correct.
The
we already discovered copyright violations there, and YouTube will not allow it.
Okay. Well, that's what we figured that was the problem.
They had automatic.
I can't believe it.
Gotcha. Yeah, they have automatic systems that research every audio that's ever been on the planet Earth, and if they find you doing the same as something else, well, they'll disallow it.
Is it okay if I sing?
Yeah, well, see, that depends on how. If you can sing badly enough, then yes.
In the blue of the night. No, the answer is no.
Whenever Chris Tarr has belted one out, the YouTube has never complained.
Well, everybody else has, but not YouTube.
I didn't say that. You did. All right. And Suncast, by the way, if my frame rate's going down, it's because I've noticed that I'm going to kill Chrome. I'm on Brave with you right now, but we're just going to have to distribute less places here. So. Wow, this won't even let me kill Chrome right now. It is amazing what Chrome has done to Apple. So hang tight.
You hearing that, Tom? Tom and I have been spending the day talking about the big companies and what they're doing. Tom's ready to revolutionize the whole thing, by the way.
All right, come on. All right, there we go. All right, we're ready to start. It is 9 minutes after the top of the hour. Suncast, we're rolling. And hopefully my frame rate in the video will improve since Chrome is killed. It certainly should. I can see the CPU utilization dropping precipitously. And so here we go. We'll start the show in 3, 2. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower and everything in between. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. I'm here in the Telos Alliance studios in Nashville, Tennessee, my usual domicile. And it is a thunderstormy, rainy, nasty day here in Nashville. It was gorgeous at lunchtime. In fact, Carmen and I ate on the veranda for lunch today, but had to come inside when it started thunderstorming. Chris Tarr is with us from Muckwonago, Wisconsin. Chris is not on the veranda. Chris, hey, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Veranda? Dumb it down there, Mr. Rockefeller. I'm in my basement.
Me too. I'm in mine.
No, it's sunny, and actually this weekend, it's supposed to get up to 72 over the weekend and then 82 on Monday. So it looks like we're finally getting a little taste of spring. It's very nice.
You are indeed having some warm weather coming your way, and it's going to be in the hundreds in West Texas and the desert Southwest, and they're even going to get hot up in Montana and Washington State. That'll be short-lived, but anyway, you are going to have some warm weather next week. Good on you for keeping track of the weather. And we're keeping track of Bloomington, Illinois. We're going to zoom into Bloomington and find a gentleman who I find absolutely fascinating because he knows so much about broadcast equipment history, and that is Andy Rector. Andy, welcome into the show. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Well, we're honored to have you. Andy, you and I met a few years ago. I guess it was just before COVID. You came to Nashville to talk to our local section of the Audio Engineering Society, right?
Right. So we're going to have a similar presentation today.
Yeah, we are. In fact, we might end up with a two-part story, but we're going to get through the main part of it today in this 1 hour. And since we actually are limited on time today, we're going to jump right into it after our first commercial announcement. And I have to give you a little taste. We're going to talk about how we as broadcasters got the CART machine. How did that happen? What confluence of technologies, ideas, and needs, that's the mother of invention, right? Need. What had to come together for that to happen? What happy coincidences were there and what frustrations were there? Andy has the story, and we're going to hear about it. I think this is absolutely fascinating. I saw this a few years ago. I want to see it again. It's coming up as This Week in Radio Tech continues. Now, our show is brought to you in part by our friends at AIR, AIIR.com, air.com. And here's Ricky Lee to talk to us about streaming. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of AIR. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with AIR.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month. All you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through AIR?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming. And from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started.
Thanks a lot to Ricky Lee and everybody at AIR, AIIR.com. They also make the Playout One software, automation software for broadcasters. It is fantastic, especially for voice tracking. Our remote voice trackers love it. All right, we're going to jump right into this. Chris Tarr is with us, and importantly, Andy Rector is with us. And Andy, I know I said we're limited on our time, but you've got a great presentation. I can't wait to see it. We're going to, instead of a bunch of hoo-ha and hoopla for the beginning, we're going to jump right into slide number 11, when there was rock and roll sweeping the nation. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, at this point, we were supposed to have a little bit of 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock, but we don't have the audio because of copyright protection. But as probably most of you know, rock and roll first was used in 1951 by Alan Freed in Cleveland, who was a disc jockey. And he got the name from My Baby Rocks Me with a Steady Roll.
Okay.
And let's
all right.
see, next slide. I don't think I have that ability. I'm not sure how I change the slide.
Yeah, so Suncast is going to be our clicker. So just tell them what you want. All right, okay. This new type of radio.
Just click.
And so we've got a new type of radio emerged top 40.
Okay, so what happened was that there was a company in Bloomington, Illinois called Molich Specialties. And Molich Specialties made a number of different type things, including a background music system. This machine is shown. And that was generally used in stores to provide background music, funeral homes to provide music, and things of that nature. They used the C-size cartridge, which was a half hour at 7.5 RPM and are 7.5 inches per second. And this quality wasn't really all that great, but it was good for background material and so forth. So let's change the slide. Vern Nolte was the general manager of WJBC, and Vern had heard about one of these machines, the background music machines, and so he went over to Molich Specialties and bought one. And then he took it out to WJBC, and he was wondering if it could be adapted to record and play commercials and jingles.
Oh my gosh, Andy, I got to stop you here. This was the moment that it happened. your second point. Chris Tarr, can you just imagine this, Chris Tarr? Nolte wonders, hey, can this thing play jingles and songs and commercials?
I actually I've met Vern's son down at JBC and B&Q, and actually heard some of this, so I'm kind of familiar with the story.
Oh my gosh!
Okay, go ahead. Rockford, Illinois, and managed one of the Bloomington broadcast stations in Rockford for a while. So I thought maybe you were going to say you met him there.
That may have been where I met him at ROK.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so Ted Bailey, whose actual name was Fred L., and I've never figured out how they got Ted out of that, but everybody knew him as Ted Bailey, was chief engineer, and his assistant was Jack Jenkins, John P. And so he said, do you guys think you might be able to adapt this thing for use in broadcasting? And they said, well, let's see. So let's go to another slide. There's a studio at WJBC. That building still exists, but it's been added on to, and the tower is still in exactly the same location. Next slide, please. So the first machines were, in fact, a Viking deck of the type that Molik had used in their background music machines. I think they changed it from 3 3/4 to 7.5, and or the better audio. And they started out with the concept of using a full swing or a pressure roller that was as fast as possible. You didn't have to do any ancillary work to get the cartridge again. You pushed it in the slot and you pushed the button and it played the commercial. And so they were able to work on this, and they knew they needed a stop tone. So they used a 1 kilohertz oscillator in the recording amplifier and a detector in the playback. And they used 1 kilohertz only because Ted happened to have some 1 kilohertz oscillators on hand. Next slide.
Okay, sure, why not?
A very scientific approach. So the machines went into use at WJBC, and they thought they were kind of neat. And so they decided to take them to the Illinois Broadcasters Convention in October of 1958. So that's kind of an important date. Automatic tape control, they got fantastic reaction to the show at the Illinois Broadcaster Show, and everybody was saying, we need some of those. That's fantastic. We're excited and all that sort of thing. So they came back home and created automatic tape control. But they had a little problem. They had no manufacturing capability and no marketing capability. Next slide, please. So they decided to take the machine down to Quincy, Illinois, to Gates Radio Company, and they there met with Parker Gates and told him about the machine. And he said, well, boys, hate to tell you this, but we're about to introduce the Spot 101, which we think is going to revolutionize broadcasting. So Ed and Jack returned to Bloomington, somewhat dejected, heads between their knees and so forth. And they decided to move on. They built a few prototypes, and they were sent to WIZZ in Streator, Illinois, a small town up in central Illinois. And then they happened to have a Collins salesman come through the radio station, and I don't guess you'd want to see these new machines that we've got back here. Yeah, I said, show them to me, and let's see what you got. Next slide. So the salesman went back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where Collins was located at that point. And in January of 1959, John Hurley, the Collins sales manager, called Ted Bailey and said, wonder if we could get together and talk about those new machines you've got. And he said, well, when were you thinking about coming? And he said, at noon today. He said, well, it's short notice. Went over. So they flew to Bloomington from Cedar Rapids, got the demonstration, and at that same meeting signed a marketing agreement over lunch.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that's short notice. plans were set for the introduction at the 1959. Now, look at that. It's January 59. And the NAB show was probably what, March or April 1959? So they didn't have much time to get that job done. So go to the next slide. So Metallic Specialties assembled the machines using the Viking decks and a big linear solenoid so that they could get that full swing pressure roller. ATC built the modular tube electronics. Collins Radio built the cases, unfortunately with little or no ventilation. And the machines and cases arrived separately at the NAB show in Chicago. Next slide.
There's a story.
Little problem here.
Yeah.
The machines were putting out more heat than the non-ventilated cases would handle, and they discovered that they had a diode problem the day before the NAB show opened.
Now, these machines had tube amplifiers in them, right?
Tube amplifiers. Transistors were not considered at that point.
Right. Oh wow.
They fortunately, Allied Radio happened to be in Chicago at that point, so they went down there and bought about all the diodes they could buy, worked overnight, and replaced all the diodes in the machines. And then the 1959 NAB convention opened at the Conrad Hilton in Chicago. Anybody around long enough to remember those shows? I remember when they were alternate years between Chicago and Washington, D.C., as I recall. So the Collins,
Chris is not that old, and I'm sure I'm not that old. So
yeah, Chris probably wasn't even born at that point. So let's see.
Whoops.
We're getting a little ahead here.
Yes, Suncast. Let's go back to slide number 23. Yeah, how to fill the orders.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So at that show, and this apparently was an all-time record for NAB sales, they took in $100,000 worth of orders from 45 radio stations throughout the United States. And they were faced with just a small problem. How do we fill these orders? Well, that's the background. And now it's time to say that Bloomington claimed that this was the first cartridge machine. That's disputed because Broadcast Electronics was working on a similar concept at the same time. But it seems to say, safe to say that ATC had the first commercially available cartridge machine because it was shown and orders were taken at that NAB. Next show.
And Andy, we're going to pause right there because there's more to the story, and with things take a turn, because I think you mentioned BE or Spotmaster, so yeah. there's a big turn in the story coming up. Chris Tarr, we're obviously, Chris, you were aware of some of this because you met the son of Vern Nolte, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And that was actually I worked for them shortly before the stations in Rockford were bought. But I also remember I've been to Bloomington a couple of times down to the stations there. So yeah, I got the whole story about how Dad invented the card machine. So
I'm sure that had to be a cool day. Because now for you youngins out there may be some people in our audience too young to have used cart machines. Chris, when you first got into broadcast, I'm sorry, Andy, go ahead.
And I just said, what in the heck is a cart machine? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we sure had them when I started in public radio, and I'm trying to remember what they looked like. They were big. I mean, each one was the size of a suitcase practically. They were big. And then the second station I went to, I'm can't even drive yet. I'm 15 years old. I went to a commercial station, WEKY, and they had the Spotmaster 5 deck, right? 5-in-1 deck. And you know what? That was kind of like the modern day automation computer with no backup. That's all we had to place that. If that died, I don't know how they slept at night knowing that if that cart machine dies, we can't play a single commercial, not a single jingle. We can't play any of our current hits because all the currents were on cart. The recurrents were 45s. and then the oldies were typically 45. So, man. Wow. Hey guys, we're talking to Andy Rector. He is, well, among other today he's a historian about cart machines, and he's got other stories to tell too. Chris Tarr is with us, and I'm Kirk Harnack on This Week at Radio Tech. Hey, our show's brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics and their virtual rack system. Now, more and more broadcast systems are getting put into virtual, let's say, environments. So we have computers that are mimicking what we're used to doing with dedicated hardware in broadcasting. And that can mean anything from an audio console, a mixer in a computer that you operate with, typically with a touch screen, or it could be a codec, an audio codec. It could be audio processing, AM or FM or stream processing. Of course, streaming encoders have always been in computers, but this lets you virtualize all that into one computer. And then, if you're worried like I was about having backup like our 5-spot Spotmaster, well, it's easy to back up everything onto a whole separate virtualized computer, either on-premise or off-premise or whatever. So the virtual rack, it works this way. You buy the server and the underlying and maybe the underlying software from Broadcast Bionics or from any of their dealers anywhere around the world. And then it comes preloaded with what looks like an app store, like a candy machine, like a vending machine. You pick the apps that you want, whether it's a phone system from Telos Alliance or a audio mixing console from Axia. 2WCOM has codecs. Sound 4 has codecs and audio processing. Omnia has products available in there. You choose your products. You click, it downloads the containerized software. It installs it for you. And this is kind of cool because this is the complicated part. I know we all think we can install software, but putting containers into a containerized environment, the networking can be really complicated, and it's got to be exactly precise. Well, the folks at Broadcast Bionics have this figured out for you. So you tell it what IP addresses you want for your different pieces of equipment, your virtualized equipment, and it handles the rest. So there's an application library, there's virtual rack management software, and then there's the whole purpose-built computer appliance. And once you install them, they're installed, and they work to the extent that each manufacturer allows, with it being unlicensed. So, for example, some audio processors may work, but you'll get some beeps and boops and things like that in the sound. You install an audio console from Axia, and you may get 4 faders that and weird meters, things like that. When you license the products then from the respective manufacturers, that's easy to do. It's typically done with an email and a payment, and you're in business. So now you can build almost a whole radio station. EAS is not in there yet, but they're working on that with the federal government to get that legal. So you'll be able to put your radio station in a virtualized environment. You can have this for disaster recovery on-site or off-site. You can make this, your actual radio station facility. It's just a really convenient way. And hey, you know what? Most of the stuff that we use these days is software anyway. This is putting the software into a virtualized environment in one or more servers. There's some videos on the webpage, as you can see here on the Broadcast Bionics website, that explain how these work. We also did a whole episode with Dan McQuillan of This Week in Radio Tech to explain how this virtualization works. It's the virtual rack from Broadcast Bionics. Check it out with your favorite Broadcast Bionics dealer, and they'll be glad to tell you all about it. Thanks so much, Dan McQuillan and the whole gang at Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech and with Virtual Rack, which is so cool. All right, Chris Tarr is along here, and Andy Rector is our guest today. Andy, let's get back to the countdown as we have our next slide to come up. So filling the orders was going to be a problem, right?
Yep. And let's see. Let's stay there for a minute, because I had already mentioned that Spotmaster was on the scene at about the same time, and they showed a machine at an audio hi-fi show in the fall of 1958. And Ross Bevel was the chief engineer at WWDC, and he was working on the design and the manufacture of those machines. So we'll change slides. And He was unaware at that time that ATC machines had been introduced at the 1959 convention. So Broadcast Electronics was chartered in June of 1959 to manufacture and market Spotmaster. Another slide change, please. They used a beefed up Viking deck with a belt drive motor. And interestingly enough, they chose to use an 850 hertz Q-tone. I don't know if they have the same thing. Maybe Ross had some 850 hertz oscillators, but they later changed to 1 kilohertz so that the machines would be fairly compatible. And that, as I said, it was about after, in my slideshow there, after about building about 50 units. They had a slightly different head configuration in that ATC had the Q-tone, I believe, preceding the audio, and Spotmaster had it retarded behind the Q-tone. And so one way or the other, the machines were not 100% compatible. In other words, if you made a recording on a Spotmaster, it might over-Q or under-Q and vice versa.
Hey, Andy, I've got a question before we move on about the solenoid operation. You've talked about a couple different methods for the solenoid, for the pinch roller coming up. And for the few people watching the show who don't know, maybe you're familiar with an 8-track tape. It's got a pinch roller built into it. And when you slide the 8-track tape in, it hits the capstan and pulls the tape. A broadcast cart machine doesn't have a pinch roller in it to squeeze the tape against the capstan motor. Instead, it's got a hole in the bottom of the cart case, and when you hit a start button, this pinch roller, which is in the machine, flies up and squeezes the tape against the capstan motor. Okay. As you did, I'm sure, Andy, I used the Spotmaster machines where you put the tape in, you pull a lever, which pulls that pinch roller almost all the way up, but not quite. Maybe there's a 3/16 of an inch gap there. And when you hit the start button, a smaller solenoid pulls that pinch roller up against the capstan. But other cart machines, and I typically dealt with ITC machines that worked this way, but there were others too that had, I think you called it a linear solenoid that could pull that pinch roller up through its entire swing in one quick motion and engage the capstan. I've said enough. Would you expound on that operation or anything that I missed about those two different methodologies?
You described it very, very well. And the big disadvantage for the Spotmaster was that you did have to insert the cartridge, pull the lever, and then hit the start button. In the case of the ATC machines and other machines that were designed in a similar way, put the cartridge in, push the button, and that was all you had to do. So it took one step out of the process. Not a big thing, but we felt it was very, very important to the efficiency of the radio station. And remember, we kind of glossed over this, but we were moving into top 40, and that was a busy time for a broadcast announcer. He had to, at the time, I was working at a station in Greenville, South Carolina, WQOK, and we had, I think, about 3 reel-to-reel machines, 2 turntables, and maybe 2 or 3 other things, and you had to pull your copy for the commercial. You had to maybe be preparing for a newscast, put the reel on the reel-to-reel machine, thread it, spindle it up, advance it to cut number 5, miss that, back up, and finally jockey it around and everything. And you were darn lucky to be done by the time the 2.5-minute song was over and be ready to go with the next segment of programming. So this was the thing that cartridge machines did to revolutionize broadcasting at that point in time, where you had a single guy that was running the whole show. Prior to this, as maybe some of you don't know, it was not unlikely that a radio station would have an announcer who did nothing other than announce and pull the copy and do things of that nature, and had an engineer on the other side of a window that was doing the reel-to-reel machines and all of the preparation work, the mechanical stuff that had to be done in preparation for the next segment of entertainment that was coming down the pike. So cutting that time down and eliminating the need to clock it and everything was a bit of an improvement we felt over the other approach.
Andy,
So
I kind of remember. I kind of remember one more method that cart machines worked, and what I recall is this. And you tell me if you recall anything similar. You would push the cart into the mechanism, and there was a stop in there that, I mean, there was a movable stop. You push the cart in, and the motion of pushing the cart in would actually bring the pinch roller mostly up. So there was no lever to pull, but pushing the cart in hard would pull the pinch roller up, and then you'd hit start, and it had just a little ways to go. But you had an eject button you had to push to let it out when it was done. Do you recall something like that?
You're right. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
Okay. I didn't
So
just make that up.
Slide.
Yeah, let's move on to the next slide. Yes, indeed.
Okay. So let's see. Did we miss one there? Okay.
No, this is it.
This is Spot Answer. Yeah. They had a transistor playback and a tube type recorder. The interesting thing is, by comparison, the ITC machines had tube type playback and recording. So they had a slight advantage in the less heat production and so forth of solid state playback. Let's see, their first machine, according to the history I had, is that WQSN in Charleston, South Carolina, bought the first machine. And at that time, Austin Knox was the engineer at Broadcast Electronics, and Jack Neff was the sales manager. Remember Jack? Next slide. Now, there were some other competing formats at about this time that were kind of interesting to look at. McKinsey had the 5C-PB, a program repeater. That was 1959. It was recorded on a reel-to-reel machine. Then you'd wind it into a magazine, splice the tape, and paint a reflective stripe on it at the beginning. So that was, let's say, a little bit complex for most people that were busy. And then, of course, I mentioned before the Gates Spot 101, which was in 1959. That machine was interesting in that it used a band of tape that was 13 inches wide, one continuous belt of tape. 101 cuts could be recorded over the width of that tape, and the maximum time playment was 90 seconds. And they used, they had a limitation of 8 kilohertz on the upper audio limit. There were a lot of those machines sold, but I don't think it was quite the revolution that Parker Gates thought was going to happen in the broadcasting industry. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
RCA also introduced a wide belt multi-track machine in 1959. It was similar to the Gates ST101, but they never sold that machine. And then Schaefer, who used reel-to-reel equipment, modified a machine so that they had photosensors that would count up to 99 windows in the tape and cue to the proper cut. So you could say you want to play 59, it would count automatically up to 59 and be ready to play whatever was there at 59. Next slide. RCA introduced a magnetic disc recorder in 1959. It used discs similar in size to a 45 RPM record with spiral grooves. It ran at 33 and a third RPM, which is kind of interesting to think about because RCA had introduced the 45 and simultaneously CBS had introduced the LP, which ran at 33 and a third RPM. The RCA machine could be cued manually or automatically in a changer. And then there was an interesting machine that was introduced by Ampex called an AG100 Qmatic, 1965 also, and used 11 3/4 inch circular magnetic mat or announcements or other program material that was used by radio stations. And my claim is that may well have been the first floppy disk. Next time.
Indeed. I think did some people maybe shorten the name of that, or they called it colloquially the QMAT instead of the QMatic, the QMAT.
Exactly right.
Okay, all right. They had some of those at at a station in Jackson, Tennessee, had a QMAT. I never saw it, but I was told about it when I got there. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think I ever saw one of them other than an NAB show. I think I did see it there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now let's go back to ATC and Collins. The first machines, as I pointed out earlier, were built by Sonimag. Molex Specialties had changed their name, or did change their name later on. They were built by Sonimag Corporation, as the background music machines had been. And those machines looked like the one that is shown here on the left side. And they had both the P series and the PB, and there were some minor changes made to upgrade the electronics, I believe, in the PB. Later on, and I believe I've got another slide that addresses this, but ATC designed a machine and brought it out under their logo. The machine shown on this left side has a Collins logo on it. The one on the right has an automatic tape control logo on it, you see. Next slide. And here's the Spotmaster. And along about this time, Collins and automatic tape control, Collins was not completely, and this gets into a little bit of a discussion, and I'll try to keep this brief. Collins, Jack Jenkins always told me that Collins, in his mind, had one of the greatest quality control departments in the whole country in broadcast electronics. And they were not fully satisfied with the machines as they were originally designed. So they kind of dictated a change, and they redesigned the machine and went away from the Viking deck and came up with a machine that had a solid aluminum deck in it. It was a cast aluminum deck, and retained the full swing pressure roller, so that all you have to do is push the cartridge into the machine and it's immediately ready to be played. So that's the comparison of the two machines. You'll notice that there's a lever on the right side of the Spotmaster, and there's no lever, only a start button on the ATC machine. So that was probably one of the most distinguishing differences in those two. Next slide. Well, Parker Gates finally decided that maybe they ought to get into the cartridge business as well, and they introduced the machine on the left here. And Sonimag, now that the production of the machines had gone to Colorado, decided that they wanted to get into the business. They introduced their line of cartridge machines and also added a carousel unit that's shown in the right picture on this slide. And that could have 24 cartridges, and it would play them sequentially. It had the advantage of being able to move forward or backward to get from 18 to 19 or 19 to 20. Next slide. And RCA got into the mix and had a cartridge machine that was designed and manufactured by a company called Ampro. And that's all I have to say about that one. It used a full swing pressure roller as well. Next
okay.
slide. And one of my favorite competitors was the Sparta company in California, Bill Overhauser. And I don't think we have the ability to do this today, but I have a funny story. We had a great friendly competitive relationship, and some funny things happened in that relationship. But that's a Sparta machine. Next slide. And Paul Shore, I think he might have been associated with broadcast electronics. I'm not absolutely sure about that, or I don't remember. But he started another company and had one of the lowest priced machines that was offered in the tape cartridge business. Next slide.
That's the one I'm thinking of that you go back to that tape caster, please.
Yeah.
The white button to the right, that is the eject button. So when you would push your cart in, there's a black screw you can see next to the capstan. You push the cart in, and it would go ahead and mechanically pull that pinch roller up most of the way. Hit start, it would pull it the last 16th of an inch, but the white button would let it go when you were done playing the cart.
And that was his advantage over the Spotmaster, because all you had to do is hit the button. You didn't have to pull the lever.
But you did have to push it in hard enough.
Yeah. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so when I was doing this, one of my good friends in the broadcasting industry was Jim Lupus. And so I went to Jim because Automatic Tape Control had a close relationship with the organizations he worked for, which included WLS. And as this one, this is Jim's wording here. WLS started the cart format when they were owned by Prairie Farmer, I believe that was a publication in the late 1950s. Mm-hmm. They were using the P-Series ATC machines, and the cart machine was a prime motivator for ABC because it minimized the musicians union record turner. In other words, at that time, the union required that the announcer not be able to load the cartridge in the machine. They used an engineer for that. And Fred Zellner was the chief engineer at KQV in Pittsburgh and later at WLS, and was the prime instigator of the cart revolution. He suggested that we check ABC archives for that date, and I didn't have that. WCFL, and Lupus went to WCFL later on and had a long engineering career there. Had some early RCA machines with the big button in the middle that came with an RCA build out in the early 1960s. And he said he started in November 1965, and his first function was to edit the turn by the Turtles and put it on a cart. And within 60 days, George Stevenson had installed ATC machines, and from then on, everything was on cart. George Stevenson was an engineer that worked for Automatic Tape Control, then joined RCA, and then returned to Automatic Tape Control, and was responsible for their line of program automation systems. He's no longer with us, and we miss George. He had a great sense of humor. Many markets were suspicious of carts when the P-Series were the only choice and committed only spots to carts. But later, direct drive ATCs made it a lot safer to commit music to cart, Jim says. In Chicago, WLS, Zellner provided the impetus to go cart for the rest of the market, and Zellner had gone to New York by the time I had gotten to Chicago. So he followed Zellner as the chief engineer. He says it's a wonder I can remember this. Actually, the memory. Lupus was a fantastic guy.
Yeah, we're talking to Andy Rector. Andy's a historian, obviously, on cart machines and tape machines. I'm Kirk Harnack. It's This Week in Radio Tech. Andy, we're going to jump into the 1960s after this commercial break. So far, we've been in the late 50s and beginning in the 60s. So anyway, Andy's got more for us of this history of cart machines coming up. And since so many of us, especially old guys like me, we used carts, and a lot of them. And so this is fascinating to understand where they came from and how they got there. Chris Tarr, what are you thinking about this? Is this bringing back memories for you of cart machines?
Oh, sure. I started with carts back in the 80s when I first got started. But what's interesting is that nomenclature has stuck with us. So when you play a file on an automation system, they're called carts most of the time. And I remember it wasn't that long ago when I talked to somebody who had just brought on new to the radio station, and they're like, "Why are these called carts? I don't get it." And like, well, that's just a throwback to, what it used to be. And, had not been for carts, they would probably be labeled records or something on the automation system. But it's interesting how that kind of stuck around. And, still today, a lot of automation systems call those files carts because of that.
It is fascinating. I don't know why this makes my heart so happy, but this just makes me glad to hear about these early days of carts. Because when Chris, when you and I got in broadcasting, the technology was kind of set. I mean, there were different competing brands. They worked a little bit differently, but the format was pretty well set. So,
sure, and they were rugged, they were reliable. You couldn't beat them for high, because when you and I first started, I mean, there was no such thing as automated stations. I mean, there were, but very few. Most of it was live, and in my case, it was top 40. It was very high paced, jingle song, whatever. And you'd have 6 or 7 cart decks in front of you, and you'd be flopping these things in and out super fast. And you get an occasional tape that got stuck or something, but you could beat on them. You could, they just were, the file folder labels fit perfectly on the front of the cart. So they were. Yes. It was an interesting. It was a great invention and really changed radio in a major way. It was a huge shift.
And just like I have to explain to my 14-year-old son, the joy of slamming the phone receiver down, you could also slam a cart around if you were just really ticked off about something. Chris, it's time for a quick spot break, and we're not going to use carts to do it, though. We're going to use live human beings. Chris Tarr is here to talk about the amazing mic processors from Angry Audio. Chris, it is all yours for 60 seconds.
Yes, sir. I'm actually using the Angry Audio mic processor right now. I am using the Rebel, which is made for the RE20. Now, the story behind it is, they're talking about, of course, they've got all these great processing products now with Angry Audio, and Catfish and Goldie, they were talking, and they were saying, well, how can we make a mic processor simple? Because that's the thing is, you look at all of the major mic processors nowadays, they have so many different controls. I mean, all over the place. And so they were talking about, well, why do they have so many controls? Well, because, every mic you plug into it sounds different. And Corny was like, well, that's you kind of have to do that. And Catfish had a brilliant moment where he said, well, what if we knew what microphone was going to plug into it? And Corny was like, that's it. I can make that work, because then they can tailor the DSP and the algorithms and everything for that specific mic. And that is when the Rebel mic series, the Rebel mic processor and the Smooth mic processor were born. What is it? Well, it's a purpose-built mic processor, and it's built for the microphone that you connect to it. So there's the Rebel, which is made for the RE20 and 320 and the 27. And then there's the Smooth, which is made for the Shure SM5, SM7, and very few controls on the inside. You can tweak a little bit with drive and compression and a little bit of a noise gate, DS or low and high EQ, but mostly right out of the box, you plug it in and you go, and it sounds great. This is one of the first mic processors I've ever had where I plugged it in and right out of the box went, wow, this sounds really, really good. And it's a sound that I've been trying to get for years. I haven't been able to make a microphone processor sound like this. And most of that is because every time you have a box, every box is different, and they tune for different mic processors or for different microphone inputs and things like that. Especially, if you have a studio with several mics in it, you can never really get them to sound exactly the same. Well, with the Audio Chameleon, the Rebel mic processor, they all sound the same. The Rebel and the Smooth, because it's built for those microphones. So you could plug in 5 of them with 5 of those RE20s or 5 of those SM5s, and they're going to sound great. They're going to sound the same. You're not going to have fighting mic processors. They're so easy to use. So if you've got a home studio, or if you've got you're a podcaster, or you're looking for a mic processor for your studio, for your radio station, check out the Angry Audio Chameleon, Rebel, and Smooth mic processors. I guarantee you're going to love them. In fact, you can get one, and I guarantee you will not be returning it because you're going to love it so much. I love it. And, I probably could have talked Catfish into maybe, hooking me up with one. I went on and I bought this one because I loved it so much. And that's a testament to how good they are. So check it out, angryaudio.com, or call your favorite broadcast dealer and get one today.
there I am, so eager to talk and so unwilling to unmute the mic.
You were so excited and then you blew it.
I know. I'm so excited that I blew it. The story of my life. So excited that I blew it. Yeah, Max Connect. I know it's spelled funny, MAXXKONNECT, maxconnect.com. So they do a lot of things at Max Connect, but one of the things that they do that nobody else does, and we've been talking about cart machines with innovation, back in the late 50s and early 60s, we're going to get into. What they've done at Max Connect is they've invented something called the U.192. Now, 192 refers to the sampling rate, which is critical to have that high of a sampling rate, and it's a standard rate. It's a standard rate to give you a beautifully perfect MPX or composite output from this box. Now, what's it meant for? It's meant for, you can now run an FM audio processor on a PC. You can choose a small PC maybe and have that be the only thing it does. You can do what I'm doing at one of my stations, which I'm doing a number of different things on the PC. It's a hoss of a PC, and I'm running an Omnia SST processor on that PC. But you can run Stereo Tool or Omnia SST, or even Breakaway One. You can run that, but you need a way to get the composite audio out of the PC and do it right. And there's a couple of audio cards in the market that can do it, but they don't do it that well. They're not meant to do it that well. And you've got drivers to deal with and all that. Well, the Max Connect Broadcast U.192 is a USB connected external sound card. And the USB connection requires no special drivers. It is a class compliant device, and that means you plug this into your PC. You tell the PC, "Hey, squirt that audio out of this connection, this sound card, and out of it you can get digital out, AES-EBU or analog out, but you can also get MPX, multiplex, or composite out, and that's the beauty of this box. And it is perfect. It is designed specifically to do that. You can then feed your exciter, your FM exciter, directly that way, or if you've got a 950 megahertz STL, then you need to feed composite into that to send to the transmitter site. You can do that too, and it's really super high quality. This will not be the weak link in your air chain. Check it out from Max Connect. This is a heavy duty box, well built. It's actually built by the folks at Angry Audio, so it's well built and designed and sold by Max Connect. So check it out. Thanks, Max Connect, Josh Bone and his crew for making this U.192. What the mother of invention there was a need, and they filled it. All right, we're with Andy Rector, and Andy Rector's here to tell us a bit more. Andy, we've only got about 5 minutes right now, and then we'll have a little break at the very end where we can have a tip of the week. But take us as far as we can through the 1960s, if you will, for cart machine history.
Okay, so we're well into the cart generation at this point, and let's skip some of this, but we've already talked about this slide, so let's go to the next one. TRW was building the machines. Molex started selling their own cart machines under their Macarta logo. Collins and ATC split up. Collins introduced their 642 series of machines. All of these were using the full swing pressure roller. And let's change the slide. And so ATC then started manufacturing and marketing their products from the third floor of the Castle Theater building, where the WJBC studios were located. They introduced the PC series, which was essentially a PB with a secondary Q-tone. And I think this is the first time we've talked about secondary and then later on tertiary Q-tones. They also introduced the ATC 55 that played 55 cartridges only in sequential order. And they introduced a new line of program automation systems, which was primarily designed by the guy we mentioned earlier, George Stevenson. Next slide. This is characteristic of one of the ATC machines. It incorporated both the ATC 55, which was the sequential machine, and there you see on the far end 3 carousels and a number of single deck cartridge machines and a very attractive young lady changing the carts out.
And so, Andy, I've never played with the 55s, never actually seen them, so thanks for the picture. But my slogan for this would be, it'll play any cart you want as long as it's the next one.
Yes, exactly right. And the carousel had the ATC machine had an advantage in that it could go either direction. So you could play 24 followed by 25, and then you could back up to 24. So you could go very quickly from one cartridge to the next, the shortest distance.
Look at the in the second rack from the left. Look at the fifth machine down, the bottom machine, the bottom single deck player. That's a huge card. What is that?
That is a C-size cartridge, and that was the size cartridge that was used for about most of the background music uses. And probably in this machine, it was a time machine. So it had a recording for every minute of the day. And if it properly functioned, you would say it's 9:59, and hopefully it would be 10 o'clock the next time it played.
Okay.
Next card.
All right. Next slide. Next card.
Okay. Sonomag changed their name to Sonomag. I introduced that. I mentioned that before. Later became bidirectional, and they too also offered a line of program automation systems. Next slide, please. So Jack Jenkins started working with Press Weaver at Bow Motor Company, where we were buying the direct drive motors. We did not have, when we did away with the Viking decks, we went to a direct drive motor, which the capstan shaft was the drive element of the motor, and we used an inside out motor, which has a rotor on the outside, and the rotor added weight to the outside of the machine, and that made it more consistent in its speed regulation. And that was the reason that Jack, the motors ran fairly slow, so he wanted a 450 RPM motor so that the capstan shaft would be large enough in diameter to have the maximum contact with the tape and thereby eliminate some tape slippage. In 1965, ATC introduced the Criterion series using the direct drive motor stereotransized electronics. Jack was assigned the responsibility of going home and designing all the transistorized electronics, and they introduced the PB and PC series and a solenoid linkage assembly, which made it a full swing pressure roller, but it was a very complex mechanical device. And I can't tell you how many times I got calls from people that would say, how do you go about adjusting this thing? Mine's out of adjustment, not working correctly. And I finally spent about a week writing the instructions and interviewing everybody at ATC to find out how they adjusted it. And I don't think I found two guys that did it the same way. So I tried to get all of that information together and rewrite the instructions. Next slide, please. That was just so 1966, automatic tape control was sold to Gates Radio division of Harris Corporation. Gates had now been sold to Harris, and they did not have program automation systems. And I believe that that was their primary interest because they did have cartridge machines. Let's go to the next slide. So this is where we were going to have a hippy dippy test tape that was recorded and created by Dave Wolfenden, one of the support people at ITC. And it is hilarious, but you'd have to listen to about a half hour of instructions on, oh, so you missed the Q tone? We'll get around to that again in 30 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Oh, we sent that
Next slide.
we sent one of those to the folks out in California that were our competitors, and they called up, and we had one of the greatest laughing fits you've ever heard because they had gone out to the test people and given them the hippy dippy test tape. So in 1969, Harris announced that they would be moving ATC from Bloomington, Illinois to Quincy, Illinois, and at that time, Elmo Franklin, who was my boss and my mentor, and Jack Jenkins, who was a fantastic engineer, and I and a guy named Merle Wilson, who was Jack Jenkins' right-hand man for doing prototypes and things of that nature, and we started ITC. how are we doing on time? Because we could stop at this point, or we can keep going for a few minutes.
You know, if this is a good place to stop, this is a perfect place to stop. But that doesn't mean the story's over, because Andy, I hope I'm not twisting his arm too badly, has agreed to come back and finish the story, because the cart machine story goes through the end of the 60s and then well into the 70s. And then, of course, I was engineering in the 80s. Probably Chris was too. So we have, there's more story to tell. Andy, we're going to take a commercial break, come back with a final thought. And so maybe you can give us a final cool thought about 2 minutes from now. And then
okay.
we'll agree to have you back on a future show, maybe even next week, whenever we can work that out with you. So it's This Week in Radio Tech. Andy Rector is our guest, and I thoroughly enjoy hearing about these cart machine stories. There's so much history there, not only technical history, but then a little, company intrigue, and I think there's probably a little bit of corporate espionage going on there. So, Chris, are you enjoying this like I am? I mean, my socks are rolling up and down. I love this stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I mean as an engineer, I always tell people this. It's hard to know where you're at without knowing where you've been. So to hear all this history and to look back at all of this, it's so much fun.
It is. Andy, don't go anywhere. Chris, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this word from VoxPro.
Hey, what's happening? St. John here, coming to you from Command Central, and wanted to tell you about the absolute best partner you can have in radio. I'm talking about, boom, Wheatstone's VoxPro. Now, a lot of folks have used previous versions of VoxPro, all awesome, but I want to tell you about some of my favorite new features in 7. And for folks who've never used VoxPro before, I'm about to tell you why it's an absolute game changer and essential for really fast-paced multi-element radio. Lots of different audio software out there. Why VoxPro? Because it was designed for radio. It's the only software designed to do what we needed to do, which is record, edit, playback in real time. When I say lightning fast, I'm going to show you how fast you can edit stuff up in VoxPro right now. So literally 3 clicks on the controller, mark left, mark right, everything that gets marked, you hit delete, it goes away. It's literally that fast. So we're going to take this part right here. Boom. From caller 9 to him saying, I'm ready.
5, ready for that secret sound.
Boom. All of that stuff, hit delete, it goes away. Here's your edit.
You are tackling secret sound caller 9.
I'm ready, St. John.
One of the best features of version 7, this is awesome. It's effects macros, and you can literally put a chain of effects together so that instead of having to normalize a phone bit and then use noise reduction on it and EQ it and all that, you can literally build a chain. One button, this one's called call right here. I just click that. All of those processes happen instantaneously. Literally saves 80% of your editing and cleanup time. Final thing that I love about VoxPro, and there's so much more to get into, but one of my favorite things, you can load it on a laptop. I've literally done my show from a hotel room in Armenia to the conference room at, this was fun, jury duty. Great thing, no one could tell the difference. VoxPro makes it totally easy. Telling you, if you're looking for the best on-air partner, call my friends at Wheatstone, ask them about VoxPro, and you will be glad you did.
And the best place to get VoxPro is from Broadcasters General Store, BGS. They're in Ocala, Florida. Doesn't matter where they are, though. You can get them on the web at bgs.cc or call them because they love to talk on the phone, 352-622-7700. They have, as I've said for years, they have sharp pencils and good deals, and they can tell you exactly when your stuff is going to arrive. So that's some of the things I love about Broadcasters General Store, bgs.cc. Thanks so much for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Andy Rector has been our guest, and Andy, I don't know if you have a tip of the week for us, but if you don't, I do for you and me.
Okay,
you
I was
want to hear?
going to say that we've talked about. To me, the next chapter of this story is the creation of ITC, International Tapetronics Corporation. And the machines that we introduced over the years, which were a myriad of cartridge machines and cartridge machine configurations, some of which the general public and broadcasters never saw. We built 5-deck and 10-deck machines for Disney and did a lot of work for that organization. And I got to go through the tunnels at Orlando And you talking about an interesting operation and all of this stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And I did a lot of work with the Disney people in California on creating these machines, and that was an interesting part of the story as well. We also got into reel-to-reel machines, and we ultimately introduced the 1K machine, which was a machine capable of selecting and playing 1,024 cartridges. I'm not sure that one was ever sold, but we delivered one and found out that it wouldn't go through the elevator to the floor where the radio station was. And I think that's when we kind of gave up on that story. So there's more to tell. And we also have talking about the predecessor of the cart machine, and that was the creation of the reel-to-reel machine. And we've talked about doing the Jack Mullen story. So I think I've sent that information, and we've leapfrogged over that, which was, in my mind, one of the greatest chapters of the whole story of tape recording.
Well, I just want our audience to know, and Chris to know too, that Andy has been scheming, and I've been scheming too, on what we can present to you. That's fabulously interesting over the next couple of weeks and this summer. And so the Jack Mullen reel-to-reel story, and then we have more stories from ITC. Chris Tarr, your tip of the week? You got some advice for us before we go?
The time at TWiRT is 5:11. That's the time card.
Time to go.
I don't necessarily have a tip as much as people love to hear these little kind of in the trenches thing. As we were doing the show, I got a text message that one of our play-by-play guys couldn't get in and on the air, and we use the one of the connections involved is a Zip 1, and unfortunately, this Zip 1 was not behaving. And thanks to Axia, we have a backup. And I logged in and changed the sources and destinations via the remote desktop. Got in there, changed those, and got the guy on the air 10 minutes before the game started. So, all while doing TWiRT. So there you go. One of the great reasons to have things like remote access and audio over IP and backups.
Oh my goodness. That's great advice, and so true that you can work on things remotely when it's all on the network. So that is so cool. I had some advice for Andy. I said, had ITC built a cart machine that with 1,023 carts, it probably would have fit in the elevator. But no, they had to be 1,024. Hey, listen, a big thanks to our producer, Suncast. He had a lot to deal with today. Like, we threw the whole kitchen sink at him, and he's taking care of that. So I appreciate that. Andy's going to be back next week or in the future soon. We got more stories to tell about cart machines, reel-to-reels, Jack Mullen's story. It's a good summer is shaping up, so hang on for that. We got to go. Thank you so much for watching us. Tell your friends about it, and bookmark us. And if you're on YouTube, you hit the little subscribe button. That'd be just awesome. That way you'll get notified of future shows like this one or next week. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.